kickstart this event. And I want to thank you all for making the time to be here. I know you all by name, so please, if I see you talking and I'm talking, I'll call you by name. And we don't want to do that. Thank you so much for your attention. If you're seeing me for the first time, and for those who are hearing this voice for the first time, as always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. And I'm proud that I'll be taking you through this session as your Masters of Ceremony and also the panel moderator to try and make sense of this amazing strategy that is going to be officially launched right here today. The aim here is to foster a green and climate resilient future. And I want to be able to request that we put our hands together for our first speaker, just to be able to get the opening remarks. And that is none other than the Honorable Minister of State for Public Investments and Resource Mobilization, Honorable Tessie Rusagara. Can we appreciate her as she comes to give us the opening remarks? Until she gets here, please. Let's appreciate her, please. One more time.
Distinguished guests, I'll say all protocols observed given the timing of the day. I wore green to fit in with the climate and nature community. And then I arrived and none of them were in green. So I think as finance, we're a bit late to the party, but we are here. But we're really excited to be here today to launch Rwanda's climate and nature finance strategy. And as we begin to align our financial flows with the country's ambitious climate goals that many of you have been a part of setting, whether it's through our nationally determined contributions or our green growth and climate resilience strategy, but also now NST2. Although we know Rwanda is not a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, I think the whole continent of Africa as well. In Rwanda's case, we've always taken a leading position in pursuing ambitious measures to mitigate climate action. We've also seen that we're highly vulnerable to impacts from climate change, and it's impacting our livelihoods, seen in various disasters, small or big over the years. It's impacting our food security, our biodiversity, and our economy in general. So we don't take this lightly. Financing the threat in climate and nature, we've seen requires not just government, it's also for all of us stakeholders in the room, which is why we thought to invite such a broad and diverse group today to join us as we launch this, but we'll also be calling you to join us as we pursue this strategy and implement it. We've seen the benefits of the decisions that we've made over the years to invest in the right policies, but also the right institutions, such as the Green Fund, which have enabled us to implement and invest in successful climate programs to date. Subsequently, we've also advanced further when it comes to the intersection of climate and finance, which is why we're green, and also not forgetting nature. Putting in place frameworks such as the green taxonomy and other measures in the central bank, in the capital markets, and beyond. We always want to do more, and this strategy is going to allow us to do that. It's also coming to enhance the climate financing infrastructure that exists today, starting with us at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning. As a ministry, we have several ongoing initiatives. We're currently doing a budget tagging exercise, but we also want to do more to ensure that climate and nature is at the forefront of how we mobilize and allocate resources. We also believe it's a growth opportunity going forward for our economy because there's a lot of new technologies, there's a lot of new financing models, and it's also an opportunity to expand into new markets. A lot of what we're doing here today has also not, everyone is learning across the globe, and as we look to grow our economy through exports, this really presents an opportunity going forward. This strategy comes in to help us structure that ambition and structure our approach to increase and scale the opportunities that we see today and the ones that will come going forward. It was developed in a collaborative manner to reflect the collective responsibility that we all have to achieve it, and we hope that going forward we'll also continue to collaborate as we have to develop the strategy. I want to thank our partners starting with the World Bank and KfW, but also many others, the UK and other development partners who've been part of this journey. I want to thank our government institutions. A lot of people have really put their heads together to develop this strategy, but all other stakeholders, private sector, civil society, we've all collectively done this together, and we hope that going forward we can continue to work together to achieve the strategy. So thank you all for being here today, and we're looking forward to engaging discussion, but also engaging collaboration going forward. Thank you.
I think the Honorable Minister of State deserves a better round of applause. We can do better. Thank you. I will say the future and today of Rwanda is young, it's youthful, and it's female. Thank you very much for those very, very interesting opening remarks. Remember, this particular strategy has been a result of immense consultations, of course, with the partners that the Honorable Minister of State did mention. And one of the development partners in the room includes the World Bank and, of course, KfW. And for us to be able to hear some presentation or some remarks on this particular scenario, we're going to welcome now the Country Director of KfW, that is Joken Saleth. Let's put our hands together as we appreciate him until he gets here also, eh?
Thank you, moderator. So I'm not female, so I'm not the future of Rwanda, but still, thanks for the opportunity, Honorable Minister, dear representatives of government of Rwanda and other institutions from Rwanda, dear fellow development partners, dear all ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to contribute to the launch of today's launch of the Climate and Nature Finance Strategy. On behalf of KfW, the German Development Bank, and also representing the German Development Corporation. Germany and Rwanda since 2022 jointly implement a climate and development partnership, which meanwhile consists of a variety of initiatives with a total volume of 260 million euro. So quite a significant increase over a very few years, and all in grants. This climate and development partnership has brought us together with almost all of you in the room and all the relevant stakeholders in the climate sector in Rwanda. But as this session today is in climate finance, I would like to highlight only two of them. One, of course, Minicofin. Being one of Rwanda's development partners, Minicofin always has been one of the key partners for us in this country, but we've seen Minicofin taking over a strong leadership in climate finance only recently. So, Minister, you are participating in the party now, and we are as well, and we are enjoying. And as two examples, I mean, it's the planned establishment of the new climate finance department in the ministry, and of course also today's launch of the CNFS, great achievements. And I would like to highlight also Stella's role. Thank you for your inputs, your initiatives, and your guidance in all this. Thank you very much. Secondly, the World Bank. World Bank and KfW are close partners in boosting green finance, investment, and trade. A green fit is the abbreviation of that project, which is a development policy operation to support the establishment of a green finance architecture in Rwanda. And the developing of the CNFS was one of the key achievements, or is one of the key achievements of this action, besides many other important actions which are still in various implementation phases. So thank you to the World Bank team, Albert, to you personally for this cooperation. This evening, we'll dive deep into Rwanda's visions, goals, and financial pathways for green finance. I'm looking forward to the following presentation, and then the outstanding panelists, which will come thereafter. So thanks once again, Honorable Minister of State, for having us today, for organizing this event. Please be assured that Germany and KfW stand ready for further support in climate finance, and that also includes the implementation of the CNFS, which will not be less challenging than the formulation. For closing, thank you. I wish you and us all an interesting evening. Thanks again for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jürgen. Thank you for that presentation and commitment for more support in this endeavor. Now, I know some of us might be wondering, we've just heard about CNFS, and also we don't understand what is this strategy all about. I want to allay your fears, and I tell you, relax, because the next presenter is going to give us some overview of this specific strategy, and that is none other than the chief economist at the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning of Rwanda, Stella Neziryayo. Let's appreciate her as she comes.
Thank you, Eugene. Honorable ministers, distinguished guests, it's an honor for me to be able to present the climate and nature finance strategy, a journey that we started together with you, the development partners, but also the private sector. So, as we start, I'm not able to see the screen, but I hope you... Thank you. So I believe that there is a reason that we're all here. It's because we believe that climate and nature is something that we should be talking about more often, because it represents a risk going forward. Among the different risks that can be jeopardizing our development as a society, but also as a country, climate and nature is a large part of it. And that requires financing. And financing that is not only accessible, but also affordable. Affordable because we don't want to put more burden on the lives of our population, but also to make sure that we maintain sustainability of our debt, but also of our fiscal policies and, in general, macroeconomic environment. And the fact that we need financing requires us to be extremely innovative if we want to achieve those goals. And innovation comes with also partnership. How do we approach partnership in a different way to make sure that we are able to achieve those goals? So there is a lot that has been done in the past in terms of climate and nature financing. Even if we are launching this strategy today, it doesn't mean that Rwanda didn't do anything in the past. So there has been a different milestone, important one, that have been achieved through the Green Fund, of course, but also through BRD with Ireme Invest, but also through Minecofin with the implementation of the resilience and sustainability framework, and different other initiatives that the Ministry of Environment, but also REMA, are implementing. But we've now come to a point where we need an extra push. And this extra push, that's why we need a strategy, a roadmap. We've been talking about the fact that now Minecofin is coming to the party, but Minecofin has been preparing for that, actually. So we've been preparing to come to the party well-dressed and ready to dance. So we are ready. And I think that should be the main message that we keep as a takeaway going forward. And the strategy was, of course, developed with the support, as Honorable Minister said, the support of the development partners, but something which is quite unique for this strategy, which combines both climate and nature, is the fact that we've also engaged very extensively the private sector. For us to be able to make sure that what we are trying to come up with is something that actually the private sector can also be partnering with us. Now, the climate and nature finance strategy, I'll need some help. It's not working? Okay. Yes. So the climate and nature finance strategy, as I was saying, is a roadmap which is going to take us from 2024 until 2030. And during this period, the idea is to see how we can have different approaches in terms of financing instruments that are going to help us achieve our goals. In terms of the financing, as per the NDC implementation plan, we need about $6.5 billion until 2030. This is quite huge for climate. And we also need approximately 107 million for biodiversity. But despite this challenging task, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, there are some opportunities that we can leverage on. There are things that we've done in the past. And that is the way we've been approaching financing with the establishment of IREME Fund, for example. Having those type of engineering and structuring of financing instruments is what will help us to achieve the 6.5 billion we are talking about. We have different instruments like sustainability-linked bond. We have instruments like green bonds. We have instruments like loans that we get at concessional rate from development partners, but also commercial debt. But also all the different structures and different institutions that we've put in place, like the Green Fund, who have been able to raise financing in different ways in the past. So it's not something which is impossible to raise that financing, and this is what the climate and nature financing strategy is helping us to think through as we go forward. So now, in terms of the priorities of the strategy, because this slide, I think, is quite important for us to understand why the climate and nature finance strategy is an important milestone in our journey towards becoming a green and resilient economy. So the first strategic priority is, of course, as we implement projects, and especially in a programmatic approach, how do we make them more green? That should be the first focus of this strategy. And the idea is to make sure that we work with Green Fund, we work with different institutions through our planning and budgeting process to make sure that we have those projects tick the criteria of being called green projects. That is the first focus. The second focus is how do we take advantage of different financing instruments that we already have access to. And I'm talking about concessional finance, I'm talking about financing which is going to be raised by the public sector. There is concessional finance, there is grants, there is also even commercial loans. That is the second focus. The third focus is how do we mobilize financing, but in an innovative way? And I think that's where we need really to spend more time, because that's the future of green financing as well as nature finance. How do we blend the different instruments that we have on the market? Unfortunately, there is not enough financing, but at the same time, there is also a lot of financing, which is not that affordable. And this is private financing. Private money, of course, that's why they're in the private sector. They want something which is going to give them some profit. So how do we come up with those projects which actually attract this type of financing as well? The fourth focus is especially about the private sector. How do we make green projects, I'm going to use the word sexy enough to attract them? And that's a reality. As much as it's not attractive, private sector is not going to be part of the journey. And there are many tools to do that. There are fiscal policy tools, there are financial tools, and there are different other tools that we can think all together to be able to attract them. And the last but not least is, at the end of the day, how do we account for what we are doing in terms of the investment that we do? We need to be able at some point to say the money that we are putting in these projects or programs is actually achieving what we are intending to achieve as a country in terms of our NDC goals. So as we implement this roadmap, these are the focus that are going to be guiding us over the next 4 to 5 years. So these are the details. I'm not going to go through that, which go through the details of each priority action or the different focus that I've tried to describe. And of course, we have an action plan. And one of the important milestones that we are proud of as a government is the fact that we have established a climate finance and nature department within Minecofin. I think this is one key aspect that really shows that we are really ready to be part of the party. The fact of having this department within the Ministry of Finance, which will be coordinating the different efforts that are being done at each public finance management steps, but also making sure that those projects are green, implementable, financeable, so that it can attract actually financing. This is the reason why we are really proud as a government to have put in place this structure. So the first thing, have the department operational, have the teams in place who are going to be able to follow up on the different focuses that we've described earlier. Of course, we will also need to be able to put together the effort of the different players in what we are trying to achieve. I'm talking about you, the development partners. I'm talking about you, the private sector. We need to have task force where we are going to be all together to be able to discuss these issues. And of course, the different initiatives that we've put in place, like green taxonomy, this is also an important aspect. We have the green taxonomy, which is going to be finalized in the next few weeks and approved, at least at ministerial level, before it goes to the next steps at cabinet level. And of course, we will also start looking at designing the different instruments that we could start tapping into. So we were talking about institutional enablers, because for us to be able to put into action what we are talking about, yes, there is the department, but I've also discussed about the fact that we need to have a structure where we meet as a group to be able to discuss these issues. And this is one of the things that the strategy is doing. The first institutional enabler is clarify and strengthen the role of the key actors in Rwanda's climate and nature finance landscape, starting with colleagues in the government, different government institutions, but also other partners. And we have the coordination mechanism that has to be elevated. So the task force will be at quite a high level so that discussion can be able to take to a decision point, so that discussion don't stall into technical, I would say, discussions. And then finally, we need to have awareness for the private sector mainly, because there is this much that the public sector can do. So we really need to be able to have also the private sector as part of the coordination mechanism. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well delivered. Can we appreciate her one more time, please? Thank you very much. And that was just a tip of the iceberg. There's more to it. In fact, in just a bit, we're going to be able to make some more sense on this particular strategy from a sense of panel discussion, which is going to enable us to discuss a bit further this particular strategy. And before doing that, I want to acknowledge the presence of the Minister of Environment of Rwanda, who's within this room. Let's appreciate Dr. Valentine Uwamaria. She's been amazing together with her team in terms of overlooking the whole process when it comes to the environment in terms of safeguarding. Thank you very much, Honourable Minister, for making the time. Now, I'd like to request our panelists to join me on stage so that we can be able to have this amazing conversation that is going to be discussing mobilizing climate and nature finance for a sustainable future. And to help us discuss this, I would like to welcome the Chief Executive Officer of the Rwanda Green Fund, Teddy Mugabo. Let's appreciate her as she comes. Yes. Joining us also on set is the Senior Private Sector Specialist Finance, Competitiveness and Innovation at the World Bank East Africa, Albert Sole. And we have the recipient of the Rema Invest funding, and she's done a great job together with her team in making Rwanda go green in terms of the public buses, and she's none other than Doreen Orishaba, Country Director, Basi Go. Can we appreciate her as she comes to join us for this session? And I'll join them. When I said the future is female, I said also the panels are going to be panels, not manels. Thank you very much. It's a very good panel. And I want us to just get down to this particular conversation. We will be able to try and make or do justice to this conversation. I want to start off with you, Teddy, from a perspective of the inspiration behind, coming up with such a strategy. I know the Rwanda Green Fund has played a role, and I know all of us on this particular set have something to say about, the vision behind this. And I want to hear, maybe if you can whisper to us, for some of us who who are not in those boardroom meetings when this was being born, what inspired this from a Green Fund perspective?
Thank you very much, Eugene. So I think this was very rightly put by Chief Economist Stella. Just because this climate and nature finance strategy is being developed doesn't mean that the government of Rwanda hasn't already been, doing so much when it comes to addressing climate change, as well as positioning itself to attract climate finance. So just if I could take a step back, all the way back in 2012 to 2011, actually, the Rwandan government adopted the Green Growth and Climate and Resilience Strategy, and really the reason behind this was that we do realize that we can develop in a climate compatible way. We don't have to choose one, between the other. And that's because climate impacts are heavily affecting our economy. I think if we can just take an example of what happened last year in 2023 in May, we were, because of floods and just in one night, we lost 135 people. But there was also a cost to it. I believe it cost 415 million, if I'm not mistaken, US dollars. So that also says a lot. We can't ignore it. Climate change is real, it's happening, and it's impacting our economy. Yeah. So now to fast track, why, and Rwanda Green Fund. Rwanda Green Fund really was put in place to, we can have these amazing strategies and policies, but at the end of the day, we need to see implementation. And really the whole essence of creating the fund was to also say, how do we mobilize, and how do we mobilize the climate finance coming to Rwanda? And so the fund was created to act as a financing vehicle, which would be attracting climate finance, both through bilaterals, partnerships, as well as from multilateral. Yeah. And then there's also various players. So we do have, before the fund we had REMA. There's a lot that the government really did when it comes to addressing, climate change issues. But to fast track, it was needed to have an all-government approach. I think what this climate and nature finance strategy does is to really say, okay, how do we all come together on the side of government, and of course, Minecofin, being the Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, has a key role to play in coordinating the various sectors, but also saying how do we position ourselves to even tap into or leverage private capital out there. So that's really, for me, I think it's a great milestone, and very happy to have Minecofin on board, because it's not something that the sector, I believe, of environment can do alone. So I think really having this marriage it's a beautiful one. Right. Environment and the Ministry of Finance then really helps us to move faster and mobilize financing at speed and scale.
At speed and scale, I love that. And we're going to come back to interrogate that further, but I want to speak to Albert. Very few people, or actually a majority of people, say we need to put money on such projects, but they don't. But for you, you've actually literally put your money where your mouth is. Why? What drove you to say, look, we believe in this, and we're going to invest in supporting the creation of this strategy? What drove you to do this?
No, thank you, Eugene, for the question, and to the organizers for the invitation. I think to answer simply is the convergence of three factors. Right time, right partnerships, and right instrument. So right time, because we came from a period of, we created a body of knowledge and an analysis with the CCDR, with the future drivers of growth, in collaboration with the government, in which pinpointed on the need to increase the private sector participation in the economy, and at the same time address the climate-related vulnerabilities in Rwanda. Also, we had been experimenting with a highly experimental counterpart, like the government, on some instruments, perhaps in isolation, but that they were also tackling this kind of emerging area of climate and nature finance. No? For instance, the sustainability-linked bond or other instruments in which Rwanda has been once again at the avant-garde of policy innovation. So that's the right timing. At the same time, our partnership with KfW was very mutually reinforcing for, I'd say, both of us. We were inspiring each other, and also our partnership with a very dynamic counterpart like Minecofin and other stakeholders in the climate finance ecosystem in the country. When we sell the idea of a new project internally, I have to admit that Rwanda is seen oftentimes as a testing lab, even from our perspective on how to design and support our clients to implement things that then can be replicable in other countries. No? So first in class in that area. But at the same time, we had the right instrument, the development policy operation, which I'm happy to say that to date we just underwent a milestone in the project preparation. We're very close to have it approved, but we were reviewing kind of like the final document between the government and ourselves. That was the right instrument from our perspective and in my view to accelerate something that the government already owns.
Yeah.
So it's not that we are prescribing, and so ourselves, and I think that I also speak with for KfW, we need a very engaged counterpart that takes ownership and has this long-term vision, this experience, and then we can talk about innovative things. But we act as facilitators, and the DPO served as an instrument to accelerate this policy and regulatory framework.
Interesting. Doreen, I'm sure as an entrepreneur, there's something that must have excited you when you heard that there's actually a strategy of this kind coming up. Because we know most entrepreneurs don't get to celebrate the second birthday of their businesses. You are actually in the thick of things within this space of green mobility. Talk to me a bit about how you feel about this particular strategy. What do you think it's going to solve from an entrepreneur perspective, from a private sector player like yourself?
Absolutely. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, honorable ministers. Thank you, Eugene. On our end, it's at the end of the day, yes, we are a mission-driven company, but then it's also about business. We're looking at how do we make sense out of this. We are providing a product. Our mission is very simple. We are here to transform public transport across, it's no longer just within the city, but across the entire country by proving and providing electric buses that are competitive, a cost-effective alternative to the traditional diesel buses. So at the end of the day, it's very exciting for us because how did we come here in the first place? Just like Teddy said, yes, we are talking about the strategy now, but the government, I really want to applaud the government of Rwanda for having already, created that enabling environment for players such as ourselves in the e-mobility sector. So allow me to say that we're headquartered in Nairobi. However, we saw a great opportunity in Rwanda thanks to the EV policy in the country. That's the one thing that attracted us. Well, we're in transport. Every day people move. Like it's a requirement everywhere. How did we all get here? We had to use a certain means of transport to get here. But how do we make that environment attractive enough for the private sector? So the government of Rwanda already had the policy to support the adoption of electric vehicles, including things like tax incentives, favorable electricity tariff for the charging sector. So it was based on these that we said, okay, Yes, there are markets everywhere, but definitely Rwanda is a market that we should be expanding to first.
Right.
So hearing about this strategy, to us it's what more then is the government then able to provide to, to make the environment even much more attractive for investments like ourselves.
Interesting. Teddy, I want to ask you this, because you've been mobilizing green financing. And of course, through the Rwanda Green Fund, you've also been offering grants to those who are actually working on green projects. Mm-hmm. But what we've been able to see is that private sector is said, I say it's said because it is not happening as envisioned. It is said that it has a significant potential to meet Africa's climate finance needs. But what we see in reality is that the public actors continue to actually fund the biggest chunk of climate financing. I'll prove this by saying that the figures that we see in terms of climate investment from government or public is 6 times more than what we're seeing from the private financial flows. What does this strategy speak to in trying to encourage more private sector investment into green financing? Yeah.
Thank you, Eugene. I think, one, we need to understand why. Why are we seeing a big portion coming from the public financing? And I think if we really want to achieve this green growth and green economy we're talking about, we have to acknowledge that technology and innovation have to be fostered, right?
Yeah.
And so these areas obviously present risks. And so the moment we start talking about risks, then that means that we're not going to see the necessary private investment flows coming through. So which is why I think that the biggest role that public finance, and at least even from what we're doing within the fund using grants, the biggest role is to play a de-risking role. I think there's a huge opportunity really to use public finance to play a de-risking role, which can then be used to leverage private sector. And this can be done in different ways. I'll mention a few. One is through using grants to really support the early stage and startup phase. Yeah. And just to use an example of Basigo or Ampersand. So sometimes we hear of these, I think back in 2018, I'll start with the story of Ampersand. They came to Rwanda and they were talking about electric motorcycles. Yeah. Now, for us, okay, of course, I'm sure we had read it in the news that somewhere in some parts of the world they have adopted electric motorcycles, but we hadn't necessarily seen that on the streets of Kigali. So when a new idea and innovation comes to us, the fund, like that, where one, it's aligned to our mandate, which is to invest in green projects, but then there's also that innovation part that we know that nobody else, whether it's a bank or there's no other financial institution that's going to take on that risk. For us, that's an opportunity. And that's how we see that these grants can be used to test, to pilot business ideas that are not proven yet. Yeah. And again, we've seen the success of Ampersand, whereby just providing a grant has enabled the company to attract private capital, through equity raising. Similar, I won't talk about Basigo because Doreen is here, she can talk about that. Yeah, so really we need to, public finance has a big role to play in de-risking, especially providing grants to these new ideas that need to be tested. The second approach in which public finance can de-risk, or how we can be creative, is blended finance structures. And here again, the example is Ireme Invest. Here, this is a partnership between the Rwanda Green Fund and the Development Bank of Rwanda, where, let me just put it in perspective. So over the last decade, the Rwanda Green Fund has been able to mobilize 300 million, close to 300 million US dollars. Yeah. But that was over a decade. And in 2 years, or maybe less than even a year, it took long to structure the whole Ireme Invest, but it took 2 years to raise 200 million, or less than 2 years. So that's just to put things into perspective, is that we need to be innovative, and we need to think of blended finance structures. That
so the money is there.
So the money is there, but you have to be creative. Now, back to the question of private sector, how is this important? Again, Ireme Invest is a blended finance, uses a blended finance approach, whereby we are providing various products, but really looking at the business life cycle. So some businesses that are still at the early stage that need to be started can access some grants. We've introduced recoverable grants. there's some, on the side of the Development Bank of Rwanda, they're providing, highly concessional, so like reduced, debt financing that is more, competitive compared to the market. They're providing guarantees. So this also, again, if we come in early with the public financing, we're able to attract, private
players,
private players. Last but not least, I don't think it's necessarily money, but it's the regulatory support that also is very important that Doreen talked about. If we want to see private sector coming on board, we need to have the right, the right regulatory support, whether it's incentives, and we've also seen that happening in Rwanda, especially for the, because of the EV policy. So, so just to answer your question, I think we're going to see a lot of public finance being used, but I think in the end, what we're trying to, the goal is to really leverage and de-risk, and so that we can reduce the investment risk and see the investors coming.
Interesting. I've always wondered why, and some people have argued, private sector players, there's a lot of entitlement. If there's no incentive, we're not coming in. And we all live in the same world. If there's a problem, we all suffer. So I'm going to come to you, Doreen, but let me first talk to Albert, just to be able to allow Doreen to prepare an answer to that loaded question. Albert, share with us your perspective, especially on tapping into international climate finance that is available, while also acknowledging the fact that international funding is also, decreasing because we are seeing a lot of global shocks. Countries are having their own issues, and so this particular FDI funding to climate-related areas is still, not that stable. What opportunities would you give if there was a cheat sheet, for lack of a better word? What can we do as Rwanda to tap into this money?
I'll tackle that question, but looking also to the debate on how to bring in the private sector as well, because that's a key issue. I think we discussed this already in June, in the 10-year review of the Rwanda Green Fund, how to bring in the private sector. But answering your question, I think that the level of ambition in this country towards tapping into international finance in this area is very high. I think that the financing gap that Estela referred to, the 6.5 billion, if I'm not mistaken, 60% relies on external sources of funding. Rwanda is ambitious because it can afford to. We have already a track record, and this kind of like, it's very prone to this experimentation that we referred to before. I think that there are other elements that we could talk on different times. I think that people work together here, and the stakeholders are not, there's not such fragmentation as you see in other countries, or skyrocketing for positions and visibility. Here, integration of efforts is very important. But trying to answer your question, I think that what the strategy does is create a framework in which new opportunities can be explored. If you check I hope that everyone here downloads the strategy, what is publicly available, but the action plan encompasses a set of actions that have to do a lot with the role of government to facilitate and to be strategic on what are the priorities. There's some actions that have to do with taking the analysis a step further. I personally think that Rwanda needs to know much better what is the pie, the size of the pie, and how to get a big slice of that pie. For that, it might be worth to map much better what are the sources of private money coming in. I'm not just talking about philanthropy. When Doreen takes the stage, probably she will talk about profit, not only incentives. So that's what firms think about. So the strategy also offers some kind of tools in terms of the digital tools, M&E tools to help the government kind of in this endeavor. But at the end of the day, it will have a lot to do with the value proposition that the country is putting out there in the global markets. And I think that Rwanda is playing with an advantage of a very rich track record over the last 10 and 15 years. So a lot of lessons learned, and a global visibility that we need to know now how to translate that into more tangible results. Because the private sector contribution is still at 4 or 5%, when 10 years ago we said that private money should bring in 30% of those targets.
Yeah.
So still a long way to go.
There's a long way to go. Doreen, I know it is not a beauty pageant between private and public, who's the prettiest of them all. But look, tell us, when you talk to your peers within the private spaces, whisper to us, what do they tell you? So that at least those in the room can be able to know. They won't know you told on them in this forum.
Absolutely. So for the private sector, let's start with, when you are coming into a market or when you're considering a market, you're looking at three major things, right? There is, yes, go in, prove yourself, but then you're looking for scale. You're looking for sustainability. You're looking for, finding a way to be able to manage the risks that they are in. Yeah. Not forgetting that there's already business as usual. There's already a status quo that you're competing against. Yeah. So this is why Stella rightly put it. We need to make sure that the environment is right. Mm-hmm. I don't want to use the word she used, but yeah, it's attractive enough because it's one thing to come and say, you're a player for 1 year. If you're not sustainable, if whatever it is that you're riding on is not sustainable, this is why you said it yourself. It's rare that entrepreneurs celebrate their second birthday. So how do we make sure that we can celebrate the 5th, the 10th, the 12th birthday as well? I'll give an example. As Basigo, we have deployed electric buses within the city over the last 10 months. We've just celebrated our 10th month. Who celebrates months? But for us, it's a big deal because this was a market where everyone would be like, what? You're taking an electric bus. Will it be able to go up the hill? I'm sure that's a question that's still on some of your minds. Yeah. But we proved that we can. That was one thing. But then there's also proving the model to the business sector. Because yes, we do not operate the buses. But how do we make sure that even the bus operator, because at the end of the day, they're also looking for what Albert said, profit. Yeah. They're looking for profit. We're also looking for profit. How do we make that sustainable? But because of the environment, we've been able to move forward and say, okay, we've proved it in the city. Yeah. Now let's plan for scale. Let's scale. Now we are looking at intercity. And we've now also been able to, just over the last couple of weeks, we've been testing our electric buses in different regions across the country. So Musanze, anyone from Musanze here? Perhaps the next time you'll be able to go home on a Basigo electric bus. We've gone to Nyagatare, that's in the north, the east, to try it out in Nyanza to the south. But like Teddy said, this has been enabled because of the support to help us, pilot this. But scale is definitely going to require more than that. Yeah. We are fighting against, not fighting, but there's already status quo. There's already what's in the market. Yeah. But how do we now provide a cleaner solution to what is there? So it's not saying we feel entitled, but it's important that there is a right environment to enable scale, to enable sustainability, to enable risk management, and not forgetting that, of course, we are not the World Bank. We are also looking for finance from elsewhere. So, for example, as Basigo, we've attracted foreign direct investment from different partners. Yeah. Of course, yes, there's a local support. Thank you very much, the Rwanda Green Fund. Yeah. We cannot talk about electric buses without talking about how they will charge. Yeah. So we are one of the first beneficiaries for this year, in this year's cohort. The Green Fund is supporting us with a recoverable grant to expand our charging infrastructure. Yeah. That is one thing. But what happens when we need to do a lot more? We are going to have to require a lot more investment. But then how are we then able to pay back the investors if all the money is going down the drain? So for me, at the end of the day, it's ensuring that the government, the public sector has created the right environment for scale, for sustainability, for risk management, making sure we can see the 10th birthday, because like I said, people still need to move.
People still need to move in that sense. But while you still have the mic, what's that biggest, the worst experience, I would say, maybe for lack of a better word, that you ever had knocking the door for a private financial institution to believe in your project and put a coin into it? That moment that you went back home and you felt, why was I even born? Because that was too harsh. And what was that moment that you can share with us? And what would you tell such institutions today? Because you've now taken off, and there are those who are now believing in you and putting their money where the mouth is in that sense.
That's a very interesting question. I happen to be blessed with experience across East Africa. So I've participated in the growth of the EV sector in Uganda, in Kenya, and now in Rwanda. And I can tell you that usually what we've realized across all the countries, most people are going to say, no, that's not possible. That's not going to happen. And for those that do not directly say that, they'll be like, no, let's wait for you to reach a certain stage, and then we will come in. And for you to be able to reach a certain stage, you're going to need someone either who is the government, who is ready to support you, or someone who is more foresighted, like looking more into the future and saying, I'm going to put a bet on your project and be able to make that work. But really, we could share lots of stories, but it's always that quick response of, no, it's not going to happen, especially this is Africa. How do you expect this to happen? What are you talking about as far as electric vehicles is concerned? I mean, we were the first to bring electric buses here. To date, I still meet people who say, no, you're lying. How can a bus go to Musanze? Until they actually see it. I recall in Uganda, when we released the first electric vehicle, it was a question of, you're dreaming. So it's always that thing of the electric vehicle, or even climate change, is far from us. There's always that myth of, no, it's affecting the other areas. But like Teddy said, I mean, climate change is real at the moment. We are all facing the impact at the moment.
Right. And here you are. You've taken off and you're going on 5 months later. Can we appreciate her, please? It's not easy.
Months.
10 months. 10 months, yeah? Congratulations. Teddy, listening to Doreen, there are many Doreens out there who probably failed to get this kind of funding or this kind of support. Just give us a sneak peek. I could also call it a cheat sheet for those who, or how the Rwanda Green Fund makes a decision on which climate and nature projects they would prioritize to support. What does it take? Just maybe 3 key things that we can take away from today if we want to get support from the Rwanda Green Fund.
Thank you, Eugene, and I hope we'll get invited to the 10th anniversary of Basigo. I'm sure you'll get that. So 3 things we consider when our eligibility criteria before we actually make funding decision. One is alignment to national priorities. Again, we're a public fund and we want to address climate change and invest in green projects, but there's also a strong, we want to see the alignment to our national priorities and sectors. So this could be electric mobility, transport, it can be agriculture, wetland restoration, and so on. The second one we look at is obviously the environmental and socio-economic sort of benefits. So we are an impact fund. So we, as much as, yes, we want to, of course, the main thing is to address environmental challenges or climate change, but we also want to when we look at the entire project, so like value for money is essential. We want to make sure that, some of the KPIs we track are green jobs created, the communities that we're supporting. So that's a big thing, really the impact that this project has in terms of the potential. And then the last one is that the innovation, but also potential to scale. So I think this one, especially for private sector, because it might not create those jobs right away, but we also are always looking for, the innovation, and that requires some de-risking and grants that has potential for growth. So those are the three main areas.
Thank you for giving us that. I'm sure we've taken note of that. I'm going to come to the floor just to allow you also to chip in. I'm sure you've been listening to the panelists and you have also maybe a question or you want to clarify certain areas, you can definitely feel free to prepare for that. But I'll ask one question to Albert and then I'll come to the floor. Let's prepare the microphones for that. Albert, I kept hearing for the last close to 40 years that I've been on this earth that there is no free lunch. Mm-hmm. There's always something, that you have to, it has to give. And we've heard from Doreen, there has to be some profit out of it. Talk to me a bit about some of the KPIs. When you said, okay, we're going to support this particular strategy development and support in its, to its fruition, what would you be looking at to help you know that, this strategy is working, and I think we did a good job from the funding of this particular project? What would that be for monitoring and evaluation?
Well, I represent a donor institution like the most that are represented here, that at the end of the day, it's all about how impactful you are, no? How much of a multiplier effect do you generate, no? How much can you use your lending capacity, your implementation capacity to kind of design and implement catalytic interventions. No? Yeah. There's a lot of buzzwords in this response. You asked me something very concrete, and it's very fresh in my memory because we just spent like a couple of hours discussing with the government what is it that this DPO, this Development Policy Operation, that it's a 2-year series, $380 million of budgetary support, so a big carrot, plus the contribution of the KfW, which is a grant. What are we going to get, we as a whole, no? As development practitioners, what are we going to get? So that discussion is something that for us internally, 1 year from now, when we come back and evaluate that those results were met, it's basically what dictates whether a project is successful or not. Yeah. I can give you more examples, but if the policy matrix has 9 specific reforms, we have aligned it with 13 indicators. For instance, in the case of the climate nature finance strategy, is the amount of money mobilized. This is a 6-year strategy, and we are coming in a year to check what are the intermediate results. So it's not that, I wouldn't call it like, there's nothing like free lunch, we're in this together, but we are bound to KPIs, all of us here, and ours is how much can you showcase that what you intended that reform to be for actually nailed it and achieved that target.
Yeah, thank you for that. When everybody, or sometimes we say carrot, we always also hear of the stick. So I'm sure there will be no stick.
No stick, no stick.
No stick. Let's have a hand up if you have any question, any feedback, and then we'll come back to the panelists to be able to share their thoughts. I have a hand over there. Please introduce yourself, and if you have a specific question to a specific panelist, please also say that.
Thank you so much. I have a question for Stella. My name is Manzi Bruno. I am a student at the Marriott School of Business at Brigham Young University in the US. I'm currently studying business analytics and entrepreneurial management. So I'm launching a platform soon in Rwanda. It's called Insure. We digitize insurance services in the country. So we enable insurance companies to deliver services to their clients digitally without requiring them to travel to the insurance companies, as well as fill out a lot of paperwork. I wrote down my question because things are going fast.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much for outlining the criteria for such innovations to be eligible for funding. And Insure aligns with a few of those, actually all the criteria you mentioned, such as national priorities, by digitizing insurance services and making them more accessible, especially for low-income earners, as well as it offers environmental benefits. by reducing the need for paperwork and in-person travel for these insurance company clients, who are actually about 600,000 Rwandans currently. It also enables the growth of the insurance penetration rate that's been stuck at 1% for the past, I can say, decade, because of how inconvenient it is to access insurance services. With its innovative approach and being the first of its kind in Rwanda and also on the continent, I would like to ask a question. How can I best position Insure to access funding from your organization? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. You said the question is to Stella. Can you clarify?
Yes, Stella.
Teddy.
Teddy.
I just wanted to be sure if you've been baptized a new name.
I'm so sorry, Teddy.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Teddy, you want to take that, then we come back?
Yes, Stella did a good job, so
Yeah.
no
Top
worries.
of mind. Yeah.
No, thank you for the question. So at the beginning, I actually thought it was for Stella, and then as you were talking, I'm like, I think this is coming to me.
Yeah.
But just in that, I think just we're here. We're happy to even talk after this.
Of course.
I think this sounds like something that, we work, again, the fund's role really is to support startups, even all the way from ideation to acceleration. So we're happy to speak as long as it obviously aligns, with all the things we talked about. And I think through Ireme Invest, actually, it might be a good opportunity to discuss. So
That's
happy
amazing,
to
Teddy.
explore. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other question? Just raise your hand up. It mustn't be a question. You might also want to clarify from where you sit, the organization you represent, and maybe you want to chip in on what has been said right here or hasn't been said and you think needs to be discussed. Just raise your hand up and we'll give you a chance. Nice. There's a hand there. Yeah.
Thank you, Eugene.
Yeah.
My name is Bazo Karimba. I'm the CEO of Green City Kigali. I just want to make a contribution to say that being here at the launch of the Climate and Nature Finance Strategy is a convergence of the intention of Rwanda. At the same time, the Green City recently launched its master plan. It means this strategy now has a pipeline. In between, we need to mobilize resources to deliver that master plan. It's a call to action to the people in the room. Rwanda is very intentional at subnational level, at national level, and now there is an SPV for which I'm the CEO that is supposed to deliver through partnerships with the private sector. Our state of mind is dual. We've just come from a public sector mindset of master planning, and we are moving to implementation, and we need to attract private resources. It's an uphill task. Rwanda Green Fund is powering this SPV. This SPV, the project is a result of a government-to-government partnership between Rwanda and Germany. So a lot is happening. Movement is happening from a macro level to a project on Kenya Hill. Let's please come together. The master plan is published. It's on the City of Kigali portal. There are green-blue networks, nature-based stormwater management systems. There is roads, and we need to deliver green and affordable housing. We sit at the Rwanda Green Fund, and we welcome you all for a conversation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's very powerful. Thank you for that pitch as well. Asante, and I could see CEO Teddy was, yes, this is something, like you mentioned, there's a pipeline already. So That's a good one. Now that we had Stella being mentioned, I just wanted to break the ice a bit and be able to just bring out a question. Probably we can bring the mic to the chief economist, Mineko Fin, so that maybe we can be able to understand, from your perspective, I know while putting together a strategy, you look at all sides. One, like we have the two sides of a coin, when things go right and when things go wrong. What do you think would make it difficult to fully implement this strategy? And what has been done to mitigate or reduce or minimize the risks of not fully implementing this strategy from where you sit? She can be helped. It's not just her own burden to carry. Yeah.
Thank you, Eugene, for putting me on the spot. No, that's really a tough question. I don't think there is, I would say, a perfect answer to that. To be honest, it's a journey that we are starting. The first thing is that, what are we ready to do? What are the compromises we are ready to make? And the compromises are clear. If we don't take any action, actually the cost that we are going to pay will be even higher.
Yeah.
So yes, there are risks, there are challenges to implementing this strategy. And the first challenge is one of the things that I've mentioned is the fact that we have a very limited fiscal space, not only as Rwanda, but all the countries.
Yeah.
So, and the challenge will be, how do we really make sure that we don't disrupt the fundamentals so that we can continue and be able to attract the financing that we need. So it will be really a way of being able to navigate through the different crises that we have. As a government, we have to make very difficult choices. But so far, we've been able to prove that we were capable with the different crises that we went through.
Yeah.
Through COVID, through the different impact of the Ukraine and Russia crisis that it had on our economy. And still we're able to maintain a sustainable environment to be able to implement some of the important projects that we believe in.
Yeah.
So I believe we're going to continue, make sure that we keep the fundamentals right and make sure that it also attracts financing and make sure that we are actually be able to tell to the world that we are ready to absorb that money as far as the public sector is concerned, but also we are going to make space to be able to make the private sector being attracted to the support that we can provide.
Yeah.
I hope the answer is...
That's a beautiful answer. Thank you. That's a good one. Let's appreciate her, please. And I want you also in the room to feel free to ask your questions. How can this strategy work for you, depending on whichever sector you represent in the room? And also, let's move it further. How can you contribute to its full success? Let's also get to hear such kind of feedback. Feel free to raise your hand up if you have any comment or response to such a question. I'm going to come back here for one last round of questions. Just to be able to hear, maybe I'm going to start off with Doreen from a perspective of, where do we go from here? What do you see moving forward? Because all of us are now talking green. We want to go green, and I've always had, from the conversations I've had, there's a lot of still greenwashing happening. Some of us have not understood what green really means, and I know the Minister of Environment is here. She'll be able to tell us if this wearing green suit good, did it work or not. But talk to me a bit about that. Where do you see this going? I know I'm not going to make you a prophet, but what do you see in the next 5 years, 10 years, this conversation, where do you see it ending?
That's an interesting question. Where I definitely see this is it's all going to come to implementation. It's one thing for us to have a beautiful, document, but how do we bring it to life?
Yeah.
How do we bring it to life so that we are able to create that impact that we are looking to create?
Yeah.
So I look to seeing a strategy that's continuing to help, address the different challenges that there are as far as the participation of the private sector is concerned. And the challenges, I'm glad she's already raised most of them. Yeah. It's going to come from financing, it's going to come from providing an environment where the risk it can be well managed. I'll give an example. Yes, we said we're attracting foreign direct investment into the country. But then, of course, there are elements around the market, there are elements around just the things that happen around where we also need to make the environment comfortable for the investors to feel comfortable to still come and, invest. So, for example, on the transportation side, we're thinking, Minokofin, could we have guarantees for these investments? Could we have elements like perhaps insurance for these kinds of investment? Can we continue the conversation around, I know you don't want to hear the word, more incentives. We definitely appreciate what's there, but we believe that there is still more that can be done for not just Basigo, but the other players that want to come into this. So finding a way to create the right platforms, supporting the promotion of the right infrastructure that we need, because, for example, in e-mobility, it's going to always be an element of what kind of infrastructure is in place to be able to support this. And at the end of the day, it's about the impact. Yeah. How much impact are we creating? So, for example, on our end, we're saying for every bus that we put on the road, we are helping eliminate at least 30 tons of CO2 per bus per year. That is one thing. But then there's also impact to the users, to the beneficiaries. We are transforming the way that public transport operations are happening in the country. We're transforming the way that the operators are getting to benefit from this business. And how are we doing that? It's through the creative financing solutions that we are providing. It's through enabling remote management where public transport no longer has to be hands-on management, but platforms where, the MD, CEO, they can attend to other business while the buses are still running. Its impact with regards to the riders, who are the last, the users of the final consumers of these products. So we're continuously thinking, how do we revolutionize their experience? So at the end of the day, I look at this strategy coming to come to that element of M&E where we say, okay, we've ticked off the enablement of impact, we've ticked off the reduction in the challenges. Just be told, we'll never eliminate everything. It's not like it will at one point just be a piece of cake, but how do we really make it easier, and how do we celebrate 5 years from now and say, it just wasn't a talk, it just wasn't a launch, but we can see things being done. Right now, as Basigo, we have a reservation book of 347 units. How does this strategy make sure that we can deliver these units to the operators? Not forgetting that for us, it's also not just a business. I like to look at this as collaboration, both between the private sector and the public sector, because we're also supporting, through this, we are supporting the government to save on Forex. East Africa generally, we are a country that imports fuel. We've talked about the crisis in Russia, Ukraine. That has impacted the fuel prices globally. More so here in East Africa, where we don't have our own oil, so we are importing. Yet, you know what we produce locally? Electricity, and that's what we would be consuming at the end of the day. So it's, I'm hoping the frameworks or the different groups that you said we would be coming together to discuss, realizing that we need you. You also need the private sector to make some of these dreams come to pass, because it's benefit in all ways.
Yeah, I like that. Before I come to Albert, is there anybody who has any feedback? Because there's a hand here. Because I wanted to close off, but I didn't want to close off anyone out from one, and then we'll go to her. Can we start with her, because I've only had men only first. So let's start with her, then we'll come to you, sir. Thank you for understanding.
Thank you, Eugene, for prioritizing women over men. So my name is Caroline Reyes. I'm the country representative of an intergovernmental organization called Global Green Growth Institute. Thank you so much for the insightful discussions. I really want to congratulate the government of Rwanda KfW, the World Bank Group for this important milestone. As a GGGI, I don't have a question. It's really taking up your suggestion, Eugene, to see how we can implement this really critical strategy. So from our side at GGGI, we are looking at two key ways we can support implementation. First of all, yesterday we launched our carbon transaction facility. It's the first of its kind that GGGI is establishing, and our goal is really to level the playing field when it comes to carbon markets, particularly under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So we are ready to support the government of Rwanda. We have already an active project in place. Rwanda is going to be the first country supported by that facility. So do count on us when it comes to leveraging carbon to advance Rwanda's NDC goals. The second area is looking at innovative financing mechanisms. We have extensive experience designing, supporting debt for nature swaps, resilience bonds, thematic bonds, green bonds, social bonds, you name it. So when Rwanda is ready and interested, we would be very keen to support it. Thank you so much.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. I want to hear more commitments like those ones. I don't want us to be those people, you'll not even finish 2 weeks. 2 weeks are always, you won't finish 1 month. So I want to hear what kind of support will you be able to give to implement this successfully? What commitments do you have from where you sit? Let's take his question, or probably also commitment.
Thank you. The second part of your question is the most difficult one, and I think Rwanda Green Fund knows why. So my name is Vincent from Luxembourg Development Agency, LuxDev. Such as other development partners, we are developing new approaches to engage the private sector. I think everyone in the room here is convinced about the necessity and the opportunity to do so. And it's nice to see that there are more and more commitments. IREME Invest is a good example. And it's certainly helped by how good the vision of the Rwandan authorities are and how dynamic the Rwanda Green Fund is. Now, you have been mentioning that public finance is still 6 times greater than public finance for climate-related projects. Yes. Private finance, sorry. So given the difficult access to private financing for private companies in a country like Rwanda, and the increased presence of public finance, I would like to ask the panel, and maybe it's a question for both Basigo and the Rwanda Green Fund in particular, whether this can maybe encourage more private actors to develop their narrative, to showcase their impact more than their business case. And eventually maybe leads to this question about the free lunch.
Yeah.
That might not translate to a free dinner afterwards.
Yeah. I like that approach, and I think it's a tip. Doreen, what do you think about this? Maybe the packaging of the message has not been correct to the financial institutions. What was your take on that comment?
I'm not so sure whom you've been speaking to, but I think on our end, absolutely, it's important for us, just like we also look at it. For us, it's always impact first. Impact first, but then the business case is also impact, in my opinion. Yeah, so there's an impact of, yes, we are helping reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. We are, creating more jobs, more green jobs. We are enabling people more from place to place. We are enabling all this. We are enabling REG make more money because now we become their client in terms of energy consumption. But then at the end of the day, I think the business case is also part of impact because it's fair play. It has to be a balance between the impact that you're creating, and also what you're making out of this. But yeah, you're right. It's always important to package it as impact, but especially for where you're also expecting to be paid back, it's also important to show that it's viable at the end of the day, because if it's not viable, how is it going to be sustained over time? How are you going to be able to scale if you're just in losses through and through? I think it's a balance between the two.
Interesting. Yeah. Nice. This I like. Let's listen in.
Thank you, Eugene. I just wanted to maybe add to, merging a bit of your questions, but also what Basil said. One thing that for us we are worried about in terms of implementation would be pipeline of projects. We have a lot of pipeline of public projects, but you don't always see the pipeline of private projects. And one of the challenges is that we always think that something has to be new. So I think Doreen talked about they're innovating in an existing sector, transportation. Basil is talking about housing. So if we want to be successful and we want to scale, I think the challenge is on many of us. How do we go and also look at the existing projects, whether it's in manufacturing, in agriculture, housing, and see how do you support them to meet the agenda that we have? I think sometimes we only focus on what's new technology, and then we forget what's existing. That also needs to be part of this agenda and this transition. I think even if you look in the room, maybe most of us are we're already in the climate community. I know that finance people, some of you say are late, but I think there's a lot more people who we need to make sure are brought into the conversation, which is the existing private sector, whether it's small, but also large. I think sometimes we also focus only on the small, but also the large companies which have an impact need to be brought into the conversation and into the instruments that we're talking about. So I think success will look like making sure all those actors are brought into the conversation and we are supporting everyone appropriately. And I think the discussion has focused on what that support can look like.
Right. I like that approach, that there's some of these solutions are just right in our faces, but we tend to look so far. For example, when we talk about smart cities, can we also talk about smart villages?
Then they become cities.
If that ever happens, I'm on record, it was my idea. Right? Any other feedback? Then I come to the panelists to give their closing remarks. I don't want to close anyone out. Any other feedback, comment, reaction? There you go. There's a hand of a lady behind there. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Fantu. I'm from the International Finance Corporation, IFC, member of the World Bank Group. In fact, the final statement from Minister Tracy actually kind of triggered my thought process of linking, the programmatic approach of the Rwanda Green Fund and the investment plans. I'm sure Teddy would be speaking more about it, and how to leverage investment plans actually to kind of really develop a pipeline of viable and bankable projects in the green space, both public and private sector financing. So I think increasingly, for us, kind of as an investment bank, from a beneficiary point of view, there is a lot of conversation about, from the private sector point of view, there is a lot of conversation about access to finance. And then from a financier point of view, we also have a similar challenge of finding a bankable project. We're keen to invest, but really getting a bankable project is a challenge. So I think there is also a lot of opportunity kind of creating a bit of that intermediation between the demand and supply by really kind of having kind of a more programmatic, a more proactive approach of identifying where the opportunities are, kind of developing a pipeline of projects, having kind of a platform financing kind of approach. Because for financiers, for instance, such as IFC, again, scale is also of an issue. So, at times also having a bit of kind of a platform financing approach of, say, like a green financing in the transport space or green financing in climate smart agriculture or other space. So I think there is a lot of intermediation that would be needed, and I know very well Rwanda Green Fund is doing quite a lot in that space. So it's just to say, I think as part of operationalizing this strategy, I think there is a role that can and is already being played in terms of leveraging investment plans to develop a pipeline of bankable projects that can be tabled for financing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for that feedback. Anyone else? 2 more? I don't want you to go home and say, Anangwe refused. I say I don't talk. 2 more? Okay, 1 more. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
My name is Jean Mukarukundo. I work for One Acre Fund, international organization that focuses on supporting smallholder farmers. The question that I'm asking is not related to One Acre Fund, but general question. I was wondering, we have Ireme investment, and what I have seen is that you get like a communique that people have to apply for Ireme investment. And from my experience, I have been seeing like the big concern and challenge is to develop those projects with the startup that can be fundable through Ireme or any other development or support. Do you plan maybe to have incubation for youth and for maybe women, anyone who want to access, to support them in ideation and getting the project that can be funded through the Ireme investment? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll now take the closing remarks. And I think I'm being deliberate here when I give Doreen more time to speak. It's part of me giving her more incentives to really bring out all the issues that private sector wants. We want to see more private sector. Doreen, I'll give you again, just under 1 minute, your closing remarks, your parting shot.
Perfect. First of all, I'd like to appreciate the Ministry of Finance, the Rwanda Green Fund, World Bank, everyone that has come together and put together this strategy. It's in the right direction. It's in the right direction. Allow me to say that the private sector would love to hold you accountable to this, to bring it, to reality, to ensuring that we are continuing to create the environment to make all these. Yes, I may be here, but there are so many other players out there that would look to benefit from this. How do we bring it to life? How do we spread the message? Because at the end of the day, all these are really tied to the national goals and strategies. We are all contributing to that. So yes, we are businesses, but then we are also aligned to providing the services and the support that the country needs, and it would come from the private sector and not the public sector. So at the end of the day, it's how do we bring this strategy really to life, to tangible results, to enabling the private sector be comfortable enough to continue to play in this market. I look forward to a city and a country where the bus ahead of you is a Basigo electric bus, and the bus behind you is a Basigo electric bus. Thank you.
Love that. Thank you very much. Albert, yeah? Right, the strategy has been launched. What next, in closing?
Okay, in my closing remarks, I'll try to also cover a couple of questions that have popped up in very little time. But I think that the strategy itself is, I see it as the rail tracks, right? So it gives us direction. It's true that there was something already happening, boiling in this country, but the rail tracks are nothing without the trains that go on it. Not to make the competition to bus now, but with my analogy. But that's the pipeline that the Honourable Minister referred to, or that's the pipeline that can come from the green cities. So that is, in my view, something that we need to keep in mind. A strategy in itself doesn't get to any results, but it's a necessary first step to streamline all efforts. In the strategy, I love one diagram that shows there where we are now in terms of diversification of sources of finance, and I think typology of financial instruments, and where we're going to get, no? Where do we want to get to? And there is a transformative shift in the sources. More money has to come from the private sector, but also in the concessionality, and also it's probably more things like guarantees, if I'm not mistaken. I just remember that it got stuck, no? So that's the vision. And in this vision, the strategy also offers opportunities for innovation. So to the comment of the colleague from Luxembourg that was mentioning about the private sector development, I don't see it as maybe the sweet spot is to stop seeing like the mission versus profit as a dichotomy. No? There's a sweet spot in which the double bottom line, like companies that yourselves are ambitioning, no? That as development practitioners should perhaps put much more effort on. I was in India with the World Bank 5 years before coming here, and we had very sizable projects in the pharma industry, for instance. And there were other in clean technologies in which we would do the typical kind of like policy and ecosystem creation, but at the same time we would put the money for these kind of tractor projects, right? And that worked very well. So I think Rwanda is the place where we could propose more innovative interventions to operate at this sweet spot in which the private sector sees the profit-generating opportunities, but at the same time there are development objectives that are achieved in that.
Thank you for that vote of confidence on Rwanda. Teddy, I want to come to you because there's been a lot of questions, feedback. There's the aspect of packaging. Is the private sector not packaging well to attract funding? There's the aspect of pipelines from private institutions is more from public, and then also leveraging on these pipelines from IFC and all that. And also the question from 1 Acre Fund on incubators. I think you can be able to say that and then wrap up on your... Yeah.
Thank you, Jean. I'm going to wrap up while I answer all the... try to really consolidate everything in the last statement. So for me, when I look at this, this climate and nature finance strategy, the message is clear. We need to do so much more when it comes to resource mobilization. We really need to mobilize faster and rightly put by Stella. It also needs to be affordable financing. So what this means for the fund specifically, so working closely with the Ministry of Finance, we've already started this journey. I'm also not really scared, and we all know the government of Rwanda is also always ahead of the game. So I think we've already started working on this. One is we need to move away from the project financing approach, project-based, where it's a small project that is here, another one is there, and then when it comes to actually seeing impact, it's very difficult. So the programmatic approach is one. We've already has been is an ongoing exercise, working closely with the Ministry of Finance, but also various sectors. Then the next thing we need to do so that we mobilize finance at speed and scale is diversification of sources of finance. So we've already, in our new strategy at the fund, really thinking on how can we position ourselves to actually attract private capital through different investment vehicles. So this is something again that we have to do in the next, at least in the coming 5 years. Then the other big thing is really that we really need to focus on is pipeline. I think we cannot shy away from the fact that pipeline still remains challenge, and both on the public sector side as well as the private sector. So this is also something that we really want to cater for, at least on the side of the fund. Of course, this requires resources, it requires technical expertise, in various sectors, and last but not least is technical assistance, which can also be part of that pipeline development process, and advisory services to the financial sector. So I believe all this kind of like sums it up, but again, with tools such as the green taxonomy that are coming up, I also believe that they will help in packaging, because at the end of the day, some of these areas again are new.
Yeah.
And so for the private sector, it's also not that straightforward. And then, like Minister Tesi mentioned, we also want to look at existing programs and projects. So when we talk about manufacturing, how can we make sure that we transition from the normal business as usual to a cleaner way? But that also requires for the the players in the manufacturing sector to understand what greening in manufacturing means, and that's what the taxonomy is actually going to come and do. So yeah, last but not least, I really think that again, this all coming together, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Environment, different players, partners, I do believe that we can achieve our target. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Can we appreciate the panel, please, ladies and gentlemen? And it will be a big disservice if we ended this particular forum talking on a strategy that is going to affect the environment, and the lead person overseeing that portfolio is seated in the room and she's not given a chance to say anything about the environment. Nagona Kyemer. Can we please bring the microphone to the Honorable Minister, Dr. Valentine? We want to hear from her. What does she think about this strategy? How can it work for the ministry portfolio she holds? Karibu sana, Honorable Minister.
Eugene. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared for this, but I was sitting here learning because it's about mobilization of funds to tackle climate issues. They've said that climate change is real. Yes, indeed, it is real. It is happening. It has been happening for quite some time. So it's something that is already here. So we have to do something. And we can't do it without money. And that is why we are all sitting in this room to discuss how can we mobilize more funds to tackle the issues around climate change. To this, I want to thank the Minister of Finance, though it is part of the public institution, but doing it together gives us more strength to do what we do in the environment. But it will also help us to explain why we are doing what we are doing today. Because sometimes environment and development, there is a bit of conflict. But when Minister of Finance comes on board, then people will slowly understand why we have to think about protecting the environment. We talk about green finance, climate finance. Sometimes I get confused which one is which. But it's all about protecting our environment, for protecting ourselves. If people understand that we do it for our lives, then I think it will be easier to explain and to work together. So coming back to the strategy, I think as the panelists explained, we've been doing something as a country, as government, together with our partners, public and private. But the strategy comes in to help us doing it in a better way. The chief economist, when presenting, she said, there is money and there is no money. That means there is money out there, but we are not accessing it because of different factors. So the strategy is here to support us, mobilize as much money as possible so that we can fix the issues we have. So that is why they said we have to bring in innovation. Private sector must come on board, because sometimes they were talking about incentives. But I think private sector must understand that greening their programs, their activities, it's also for the sustainability of their businesses. So yes, the government must support private sector, but private sector must also understand that it's for their own benefit, and at the end, it's for the benefit of all of us. So I want to thank again the Minister of Finance for putting up this strategy. And as the CEO of Green Fund, Teddy said, we are also working on another strategy, a green finance strategy. How do we mobilize more funds? But we will align with the strategy put up by Minecofin. So in the near future, we will call you again to discuss how we are going to do it. Because the strategy is here to guide us, but as an institution in charge of mobilizing more funds, how are we going to do it? That is what we are going to present to you. Otherwise, thank you, Eugene, for giving me the floor, though I was quiet listening and learning. But I thank every partner here in the room. I know we are doing a lot together, but we want to do much more together again. Yeah. My background, I'm a scientist, and today I'm happy that I keep telling people that science is now making sense. Because we've been learning a lot around pollution, air pollution, water pollution, and all that. But we could do so many testing and find out that this area is polluted, but full stop. But now when I see that REMA, together with other partners, World Bank, we are now restoring Nyabugogo wetland. I know since 20 years back that Nyabugogo was polluted. I did so many tests about the wetland, but I couldn't do much more because there was no program, there was no strategy, and that is why I'm proud of my country that it has been understood that if we don't protect wetlands, if we don't plant trees, if we don't do this and that, we will suffer, and we've already started feeling it from what happened in Rwanda last year, where we lost so many lives in one day, one night. That was the first time experiencing it, but it gave us a lesson, a reason why we have to do much more to protect the environment. Thank you so much. I think I tried to say something.
Well done. Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much. Yeah. The strategy is here. Let's use it efficiently so that we can protect our environment. Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I want us to put a round of applause to our panelists as we release them. Please, you can take your seats. And I also want to thank you for being a great audience, and you've been very amazing in listening in through. And I know the strategy is available. If you do not have so much details about it, I'm sure that you can be able to get access to it and be able to see how best you can make it work for all of us, because environment affects all of us in one way or another. I want to close now, but I want to tell you this. When I saw this particular theme, fostering a green and climate resilient future, the key word for me was future. And we always say that we've borrowed this earth. It belongs not to us, but to our children and their children and theirs. So dealing with this, because we are thinking about the future, is a ticket for you in heaven. You've done a good job. When you get there and Angel Gabriel says, no, you don't have a ticket here, tell them Anangwe said, we do, I have. Because I participated in making a future for our children better. Thank you so much, all of you, for being a part of this strategy. So I want to end at that particular note, but I want to remind you that there's cocktail and some bitings. Let's interact. Don't be in a rush to leave. Please get to know each other more and see how best you can support this particular strategy. So live from the launch of the Rwanda Climate and Nature Finance Strategy, as always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Signing off. Thank you very much. God bless you so much.